Hi, I'm James. Are you looking to be a guest on podcasts? Perhaps you've never done it before and you're not sure what to say when it comes to your first interview, or maybe you're a business owner and you're looking for an effective way to market your products and services, and you're spending a lot of money on pay-per-click or Facebook ads and looking for an alternative way to grow your business while speaking to people who are highly engaged and not spending as much money on pay-per-click or PPC. Well, podcast interviews are a fantastic way and a fantastic tool to do this. So I want to share with you today my top 10 tips which will allow you to be the best guest you possibly can, and allowing you to go into every interview with confidence and making every appearance the best it possibly can be. Plus, at the end of this video, I want to share with you my top 3 guest pitch templates which have worked really effectively for me and allowed me to get booked myself on over 200 podcasts over the past year. So make sure you watch to the end. I'll be giving you more details of how you can get your hands on them. So if you're new here or don't know me, my name is James Mulvany. I am founder of radio.co, podcast.co and matchmaker.fm, and I've also helped tens of thousands of people get booked onto podcasts and make connections with interesting guests over the past couple of years via matchmaker.fm. So in this video, I wanted to share with you my top 10 strategies for being the best podcast guest you can, and also share with you my top 3 outreach templates which have allowed me to get booked onto over 200 podcasts over the past couple of years. As I mentioned, make sure you watch the end to get hold of those. So let's get started. Now, my first tip is no hard sells. When I say this, I know we've all got an agenda. We're all getting booked onto podcasts because we likely want to promote our business, we might want to sell products or services, or we might be selling some kind of story or promoting some kind of book or promoting something. There's no problem with this. Most podcast hosts are fully aware that the guests they have on have got some kind of commercial agenda. But when I say no hard sell, I mean you don't need to go in all guns blazing. First and foremost, each interview you do should be focused around your story. It should be focused around delivering value. So when I say delivering value, I know this is a term that's really overused in the kind of content marketing and personal branding world. The best thing I think to do is sit down and create your value proposition. So look at your areas of expertise and figure out how you can break them down and what sort of podcasts you might want to approach. I'd start by looking at 3 key areas that you have expertise in. So for example, my 3 key areas of expertise are sort of sales and marketing, business and entrepreneurship, and then kind of like personal development, personal growth. So quite often when I'm approaching podcasts, I'll have lists of things that I want to talk about within those 3 areas, and I'll specifically reference those things. And then I'll have stories within those 3 areas that I will tell when I appear on podcasts, which I believe will deliver value to the listener, the person who's tuned in. Will get them engaged so they listen to that entire episode, and that gives me then an opportunity to soft sell my products, soft sell my services or my websites right at the end. I don't have to go in and be like, straight away, you need to buy my products, you need to buy my services, or sign up here, or, visit this website. That's not always the best way to go in. Sure, you can introduce yourself as founder or CEO of blah, blah, blah.com or whatever it might be, but you need to go in and try and deliver value up front and then focus on converting those listeners into leads for your business and services towards the end of the podcast. If you follow that strategy every time, you'll get much better results as opposed to going in with the hard sell. No one wants to be sold to, but people love to buy. Number 2, make sure your equipment is high quality and in working order before you go into a podcast. Now, when I say high quality, firstly, it's worth investing in a really good quality microphone. If you haven't done already, relying on your computer's inbuilt microphone or your phone microphone just doesn't cut the mustard these days. You need to make sure you go out and invest in a high quality USB microphone. You can get a really good quality USB microphone for $50 to $100, which will sound great. It's going to sound 10 times better than any microphone that's built into your computer or your laptop. Then what you need to do is make sure that microphone is working correctly. Test it before you actually go into the interview. So open up a recording app or something on your computer, record yourself, listen back to it. Does it sound good? get your mic technique right, how far away should you be from the microphone. All of this stuff will make your interview sound better and make you come across better, more professional, etc. Then when you go into the interview, whatever software you're using, let's say you're using something like Zoom to record your interview or another podcast recording app, this is a mistake I see people making time and time again. Make sure that that microphone that you've bought and you've plugged in is selected as the sound input device. If you don't have it selected, quite often it will just default back to your built-in computer microphone. And again, I've interviewed guests in the past where they had a microphone right in front of them, but it sounded awful because they haven't selected it. Very, very important. So my third tip is read any questions, instructions, or emails from the podcaster or from the podcast producer before you go into the interview. So when it comes to answering the questions, don't worry, you don't have to spend ages writing a big long script or writing lots and lots of information about each answer. I find the best method is to write a bulleted list of points that you want to get across as part of your answer. So that may involve simple things like remembering to mention this, or remembering to mention that experience, referencing that thing that happened within my business or within my story. The good thing about this is if your mind goes blank during the interview, you have a great set of reference points that you could draw upon to make your answer sound even more compelling. Number 4, be punctual. The worst thing as a podcaster is when guests don't show up or they show up late. Bear in mind that podcasters, the producers that may be involved in creating the show, are also busy. They have other things to do too. So make sure that you show up in time, or if you can show up a little bit early, even better. And also leave some time at the end of the podcast in case things overrun. Sometimes podcasters like to talk. Sometimes conversations can kind of go off on tangents, which isn't always a bad thing. And quite often this will be edited down, but maybe leave half an hour after your interview just in case things overrun. Number 5, be calm and relaxed. I know it can be a little bit intimidating if you're just starting out recording podcast interviews. Maybe you're not used to being in an interview situation. Sometimes asking for a pre-show chat can be helpful because it allows you to kind of establish rapport with the podcaster, speak to them about what you want to talk about or what they want to ask you about, and just sort of generally get to know them a little bit before you actually start recording. Quite often podcasters will actually ask you for a pre-interview chat as well. So again, if they ask for this, don't be put off. It's just them making sure that you're going to be a good guest and a good fit for their show. But ultimately, when it comes down to recording, just try and relax into the situation. There's no need to rush. Remember to breathe. Remember to pause between sentences, and as I say, enjoy the process. You're just having a conversation with another human being. There's nothing to be scared or intimidated about. I know sometimes when you first hear your voice being replayed back to you, kind of like, does I actually sound like that? But ultimately, all you're doing is having a conversation. That's what podcasting is about, and that's what listeners want to hear as well. Number 6, research the show. Make sure that you've listened back to a couple of episodes so you understand the format of the show, you understand the style of the host, and also what sort of questions that they sometimes ask guests. There's a couple of different styles of podcasts. Sometimes a podcast will ask the same set of questions each time, and then sometimes each episode will be completely different. They might even cover completely different topics. So try and get a feel for what the show's about, the ethos behind it, and what sort of audience might be listening to that show. If you can answer all of these questions, it will give you a competitive edge as a guest. It will allow your episode to stand out perhaps amongst the other episodes, and also really allows you to deliver the best interview that you possibly can. So number 7 is bring something unique to each interview. It's really, really easy, and especially once you get into the habit of doing lots and lots of podcast interviews. As I mentioned before, I did 30 podcast interviews within 30 days. And over the past year, I've probably done now around 200 different interviews. It can become really easy to start telling the same stories again and again. There's not necessarily a bad thing to this, because ultimately each time you go on a podcast, the audience might be slightly different. However, if you start saying the same things again and again, maybe sometimes there might be some crossover in the audiences. So you might want to come up with some unique things or unique tales to tell for each interview. Plus also it keeps it really interesting for you as well. You don't want to be just repeating the same stuff again and again. You don't want to sound tedious, and you need to keep yourself kind of on your toes as well. So I think having something unique or bringing something unique to the table for each interview you do is really crucial. Number 8 is go with the flow, and don't try and steer the conversation in one particular direction. Remember, this is not your podcast, okay? And you're not the one asking the questions here. So you need to respect the interviewer or the podcast host. You need to respect the fact it's their show. So it's really up to them what they want to talk about. So try and just go with the flow, allow them to ask you questions. And if they go off piste a little bit, or if they start talking about something that you've brought up that sounds really interesting, be open to it. Be accepting of the fact that, if they want to interview about something that perhaps wasn't originally planned, podcasting doesn't always have to be a rigid format. It can be a conversation, and that can sometimes make for the best interviews as well, by the way. So if you're thinking, we've got this set of questions and I have to stick to these rigidly, but then the podcast host will maybe ask you about something that you've mentioned during one of the questions or one of the answers to the questions, give them more information to go off, tell them more about that story. Number 9, share that podcast once it goes live with your own audience. One of the reasons podcasters like getting guests on is it allows them to in turn grow their audiences. The podcaster is doing you a bit of a favor by giving you that exposure to the audience that they've spent sometimes years building. So make sure you return the favor and make sure that once the episode is live, you then share that episode on your social media channels with your audience too. It might even be worth emailing your audience, your email list, to tell them that you've been on a podcast. This is also great for your audience as well, because it allows them to engage with you and listen to someone else interviewing you. Again, that really helps with the authority positioning, and also it allows your audience to find out stuff about you that they might not have heard already. Because as I mentioned before, each podcast episode can be slightly unique. You might want to talk about different things. So remember to share each podcast appearance you do with your own audience too. Sometimes podcasters will also send you assets. They might send you images or video clips from the show that they want you to share with your audience. It's really, really easy to obviously schedule these using different social media tools, but make sure you post these to your social media accounts as well. Number 10 is stay connected with the podcast host. Use podcasting as a tool for networking, not only with the audiences that you're exposing yourself to, which is fantastic to build leads and grow knowledge of you or your products or your services, but actually sometimes the podcast hosts themselves are really, really interesting people and they're worth staying connected with. It might be that you have, like a kind of little black book that you keep all of the podcast hosts that you've been interviewed in, you keep their name, you keep their email address on record, and then perhaps if you've got something in future that you want to share, you can reach back out to them and see if they'd be up for interviewing you again, or maybe you then end up starting your own podcast and you think that person might be great to interview, and you'd be sat on the other side of the fence, so to speak, being the interviewer, and they could be a guest. But remember to keep in touch and remember to keep a record of which podcasts you've been on, the date you appeared on them, and it's really, really helpful just to have that kind of record so you can kind of always reach back out to people. Ultimately, podcasting is a networking tool. So there we go, 10 tips to being the perfect podcast guest. If you follow this guide, I guarantee each interview that you do will be absolutely amazing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I've put together 3 fantastic pitch templates. These are templates that I've used myself, so I know they're really effective, to get booked on over 200 podcasts probably over the last year and a half. And also use these as part of my 30 and 30 challenge. So I actually got booked on 30 podcasts within 30 days. You can download these pitch templates for free at guest.academy/pitches. That's guest.academy/pitches. I'll put a link in the description below. You can get these for free. I'd love to share them with you. As I mentioned, they've worked really, really well for me, and I think they'll work really well for you as well. Thanks very much for watching this video, and I'll speak to you soon. Take it easy. Hey, before you go anywhere, I'd love to share with you my proven pitch templates. I've used these templates to get booked on over 200 podcasts over the past year as a guest, and they're yours for free. You can download them over at guest.academy/pitches.